Had you ever seen how certain people just disappear without any explanation or drama? When it comes to Sigma males, this disappearing behavior isn't random. Rather, it's deliberate, calculated, and typically permanent. Most people assume that ghosting is caused by fear or immaturity, but psychologist Dr. James Miller observes that some personalities choose silence, not out of avoidance, but rather from a clear understanding that words have lost all meaning. Because these men don't ghost for fun or to play games. Rather, they do it because they've learned something that most people miss. Sometimes the best way to deal with a toxic situation is to completely remove yourself from it. Imagine a computer that runs too many applications and eventually has to be reset in order to function correctly. Because when a Sigma male ghosts, it's not a temporary timeout, rather, it's a permanent deletion. Let's examine 8 reasons why these men occasionally decide to disappear and why it's frequently the only logical solution for them. Sigma males have a similar perspective on certain relationships. When things get exhausting, when boundaries are consistently disregarded, and when the same cycles keep happening, they simply leave without trying to correct or explain. The most important trust is violated. Beyond repair, the largest breakdowns are sometimes caused by the slightest falsehoods. For Sigma guys, these little betrayals mount up more quickly than most people think. They may begin with innocent white lies. One little lie leads to another and another until the whole foundation begins to fall apart. Little tales that don't quite go together, broken promises, and other incidents all leave an imprint like little scratches on glass. One scratch may not seem like much, but when there are enough of them, the whole thing breaks. People sometimes confuse a Sigma's quiet observation with forgiving because they believe that if he isn't reacting, he must not be noticing. However, in fact, he is seeing everything and making connections that others aren't even aware of. Trust isn't only about significant betrayals. It's in the little things, like promising to do something and then forgetting to do it, or reciting the same narrative in various ways and making excuses that pile up like old newspapers. These little setbacks are more significant than major ones because they reveal trends. When confidence is eventually lost, it's often over a minor issue, like a last scratch on previously broken glass. Showdown. There is no major conflict, just a quiet realization that this connection cannot be repaired any longer, and at that point, cost becomes the only viable solution because, once trust is lost, explanations are just incoherent words. After all, why would you write an ending to a story you already know is the second piece of fiction? The physics behind energy vampires is fascinating. Have you ever noticed how certain individuals sap your energy with every interaction? They don't physically exhaust you, but rather emotionally deplete you as if they disconnected your battery? Although our brains are designed to save mental energy, certain personality types are able to circumvent these protections, leaving us emotionally spent and unaware of why talks that begin lightly but invariably wind up heavy with good news turning into drama. Brief conversations turn into one-hour therapy sessions. It's like being stuck in an emotional labyrinth with a constantly shifting exit. Initially, the drain is scarcely perceptible, and after talking, more rest time is required in between sessions. More relief when plans are cancelled since you're already running low by the time you notice the trend. Sigma guys approach this differently than others. Instead of attempting to improve boundaries or change the dynamic, they have discovered that certain individuals are like emotional black holes. The more you give, the more they crave when this happens. Clarity strikes you can't pour from an empty cup, and some people never stop asking for refills, so sometimes walking away isn't just an option, it's the only way to recharge. Ghosting isn't about being cold or harsh, or even about the other person anymore. It's about keeping your peace. 3. Respect lines are crossed. Do you know those boundaries that you shouldn't have to explain, such as basic etiquette, keeping your word, or treating others with dignity? Most people understand these unwritten rules, but some people keep pushing them a bit further each time a joke that goes too deep or a commitment is casually broken. Every time it occurs, they watch for reactions, and if you don't push back hard enough, they push first the next time. Disrespect is handled differently by Sigma guys. Instead of making a scene or demanding an apology, they discreetly record every boundary that is violated, every little infraction that people believe went undetected, and it's like maintaining a mental ledger. The first few marks may be excused. Everyone makes errors, but eventually the equilibrium shifts. The pattern becomes evident. This is no longer about accidents, rather, it's about someone who essentially disregards limits, which is often when the gusting occurs with no warnings and no last chances. No spectacular departures, simply having a calm understanding that someone who consistently crosses lines won't suddenly start showing them respect is important, because most people don't realize that respect is something you can't have unless you demand it, and once a Sigma male realizes the truth about someone remaining around, it only invites more disrespect. Sometimes the only way to keep your boundaries safe is to become one number 4. The games get old, and the same old tricks keep appearing in new costumes. Social games such as small power plays, guilt trips, sweet talk, emotional blackmail, and phony emergency calls while they're busy may be effective on others, but Sigma males develop a kind of radar for manipulation that makes each attempt easier to spot than the last. Information supplied strategically to elicit responses, they may initially handle each situation calmly, but eventually the truth comes out. Every move is calculated, every crisis is manufactured, every reaction is engineered for effect, and the SLE hints about other people's interest in the mysterious problems that only they can solve. The carefully timed drama when things are going too smoothly is like watching reruns of a show where you already know every plot twist. That's often when things changes, not because they're angry or frustrated, but because they realize they've outgrown the same strategies that used to sound brilliant and now seem worn out and apparent, so they decide to take the last step. Total disengagement, like smoke vanishing into the atmosphere, they stop participating in the game completely, allowing others to play by themselves using their own strategies. When he's finished, there's no need to stay for the same old show number 5 words, since the Sigma male understands that games only function when you consent to participate. Put an end to matching actions and keep playing. Notice the distinction simple arrangements often go through, commitments dissolve, and Sigma males in image games do this between what people say and what they really do. Once they start to notice the gaps, they can't unsee them. Promises made into thin air, turn into hollow echoes. The disparity between words and deeds widens over time when individuals make lofty claims that conflict with their modest everyday decisions and espouse principles they don't live by. It's like watching a movie where the audio doesn't match the footage. It's like seeing someone paint a painting that differs from the frame they specified for a Sigma. Similar to a music playing out of tune, this misalignment becomes difficult to ignore once you hear it and get distracted. Every new announcement only serves to emphasize how far reality has come. Sometimes silence is the only sincere response to endless empty words when actions are screaming the truth. After all, actions will always tell the real story. Number 6, so a clean break becomes necessary. When one deviates from the spoken word, ghosting becomes the natural reaction because there's no reason to keep listening to explanations. Sigma guys are aware of when to make a full cut, since occasionally cutting a rope halfway tangles you both. These guys strive to gently notice what most others overlook, without loose ends, mess, or what-ifs lingering in the air. Usually, fade away causes more issues than it fixes. When it's time for a fresh start, a Sigma detects something that most people don't half examine, while others skirt the edges in the hopes that things will somehow get better. They remain unbiased and know when it's time to make the difficult decision. Broken ties hurt more than full endings, like a band-aid that has to be torn off. Prolonging it just makes things worse. Most people get trapped between hope and guilt, but Sigma men are able to read circumstances well enough to know when prolonged bleeding is preferable to speedy surgery. They don't like making these cuts, they only know when they're necessary, at which point ghosting turns into kindness rather than cruelty. Although it may first appear harsh, a total departure breaks the never-ending loop of conflicting messages and misplaced expectations. These guys have discovered that sometimes the most kind thing to do is to cut someone clean, because they have discovered that certain breaks must be finished in order for both parties to recover and go on. 7th place, it's no longer worthwhile. When most people would overlook these discrepancies, basic arithmetic often discloses the harshest truths. The work you put in versus what you receive back, the time you spend versus the value it offers. The analytical character of a Sigma man forces him to confront issues directly, and their distinct viewpoint on relationships makes them stand out. While others seek connections at all costs, these men have a clear internal ledger because it's ingrained in them. Their innate capacity to balance investment and value, not out of coldness but rather because they understand that genuine connections should strengthen rather than weaken. A Sigma's spirit of independence gives him a distinct clarity in these circumstances. His innate ability to detach from societal pressure allows him to see relationships impartially, free from the haze of duty or fear of criticism that traps others in unsatisfactory relationships. Consider how often you modify your schedule to accommodate someone who never does the same thing. How much effort do you put into one-sided discussions? For Sigma guys, gusting becomes easy math since they are self-reliant and don't do it out of resentment or anger. How many chances do you lose while waiting for them to match your effort? They have learned well from nature that time and energy are finite resources. Sometimes letting go is simply smart business. Other times, spending them where they aren't valued isn't just foolish, it's robbing from your own future. 8th place. Naturally, some ends occur as softly as possible. The capacity to identify natural ends distinguishes Sigma men from others who would frantically cling to eroding relationships, as leaves change color not with drama or sorrow but rather with a gentle fade into something else. These men are aware of the rhythm of relationships. They feel the subtle changes when conversations lose depth and when shared silence turns awkward instead of comfortable. One day, the topics that once sparked hours of intense debate become barely interesting. Inside jokes lose their meaning. Inside references feel like echoes from another time. And their unique perspective helps them see these changes clearly. Unlike people who try to stop time or force dead connections back into life, Sigma males accept evolution as a natural part of life. It's ingrained in their DNA. This ability to recognize when a chapter is truly over. The messages get shorter, the silences get longer, plans become maybes, and then fade into perhaps future times, not out of hurt or rage, but simply because people sometimes grow in different directions. Then, like autumn leaves dropping, letting go becomes the most natural reaction because these guys realize that certain things are designed to end on their own time. If you have a different perspective on the world, you're at the proper spot. Some ends are just completions rather than failures. Click, like, and subscribe for further ideas on the Sigma method of thinking. If this film made you think, please share your thoughts in the comments section below.